Actually, I'm not very sure what knowledge mobilization is. I'm still trying to make sense of it. But, well, I'll just follow on from what Elizabeth shared earlier. Mrs. Joseph would like us to maybe share a little bit more. Research translation is Elizabeth's sort of unit or the initiatives that we oversee. Now, the Office of Education Research at the National Institute of Education, or the National Institute of Education, in fact, a lot of the funding, our major paymaster or our stakeholder is the Ministry of Education. And the Ministry of Education has sort of set apart tranches of money. We're in our third tranche of educational research funding, and in the current proposal for our fourth tranche, each tranche is about, the last tranche was about 110 million dollars, and that funds primarily educational research. But part of that money goes into funding the office efforts to really engage. I think in the last tranche, the pressure or the request has been, and one of our strategic missions and goals has been, now with 1,000 flowers bloom over the past 8 to 10 years, the last two tranches. The first strategic effort on educational research with funding from MOE, the first tranche came in 2003. So we're in our third tranche now, 5-year tranches, and the focus is on us to really think about the social impact to apply of our research funding. So the units of research translation and knowledge mobilization essentially aims to engage practitioners and our stakeholders in a series of translating, applying, and making sense of those findings, and making sure that our practitioners and our stakeholders have a say and are aware of them and engage with these as sort of knowledge that they can apply for teaching and learning in classrooms, in schools, and beyond. So that's what we do at the office, and please feel free to talk to us a little bit more during lunch to find out about grants processes, as well as how to foster some of these productive collaborations going forward, so our collective research can have more of an impact on our system in Singapore. So today, well, Joseph requested, I think, we structured our sharing, Elizabeth and myself, within the theme of intervention, and primarily in schools, to foster 21st century learning outcomes is part of my passion and part of my work. So today sharing, I'll share with you one of my primary research projects in secondary schools with co-designed and implemented and evaluated alongside teachers and students. So broadly, fostering 21st century literacies through collaborative critical reading and learning analytics environment. This is funded by an ALSET research funding grant, which has been covered yesterday and today. But it's very focused on schools, K-12, and I'm focusing primarily on secondary 3 students. And by 21st century literacies, I'm referring specifically to collaborative, creativity, and critical competencies. In the specific domain, in reading, in English language. English language in Singapore is different from language arts in many of my counterparts in Australia or in the US, where English language, the technical functional English language, is taken together with English literature as a whole. But in Singapore, they're demarcated. So literature and as a social sort of sciences, humanities subject is separate from English language, which historically has been well, I think, taught and delivered and learned in a more functional and technical manner. In fact, our first Prime Minister said that, with the English language policy being our national language, my colleagues, my counterparts, Singaporeans will know that it's the language to access the science and technology of the West. But we need to nurture our mother tongue so as to preserve or have a barrier against the decadence of the West, apparently. So language was seen as a very neutral tool, and it was taught in a very functional way. And in recent years, there's this attempt to, I think, weave in high order thinking, critical literacy, new literacies, But those are very new, I think, in implementation and outworkings in the schooling sector. So these are some of the contextual challenges that we face, that we work in the schools. So the journey here, just to give you a very quick, before I go into what WeRead is about, is that it started in 2015, and it started with one incubator school. And the first trial, this is a design-based trial. It was involved 3 classes of students, secondary students, 15-year-olds. Then in 2016, it grew to 7 classes within the same school, and in 2017 and beyond, it spread to, in addition to the 1 seed school, and again, in the year level implementation, it has spread to more than just the academically strong tracks of students to cover also normal academic students. If that makes sense, it's the second tier ability bands in Singapore track. And there are 4 new trial schools, 8 classes, in 5 more schools, and so on. We've done a number of teacher PD workshops. But we're also, part of the sharing here today is to open it up to critique and suggestions and improvements, because we're very aware of the limitations, in addition to the potentials for improving teaching and learning in English language in secondary 3. So the impetus for WeRead was that there were these contextual challenges that were identified by our teachers, English language teachers, to deepen learning outcomes in English language. All right. So specifically, they identified 3. Now, even though the new revised English language syllabus privileged higher order thinking, critical literacies, and closer reading, and using analytical lens to critique text and appreciate texts, teachers found that there were 3 key impediments to the, achievement of these learning outcomes, or nurturing or cultivation of these learning outcomes in young people. Firstly, a lot of our text was still pre-based in class, rather than multimodal. So how can we extend the pre-based text engagements to multimodal text engagements? So along that is, how do we expand opportunities to engage students in reading as an individual and social practice, leveraging on sort of technology, contemporary technologies to engage them, but also in socially rich ways, dialogically rich ways, and technologically, as I mentioned earlier, cognitively challenging ways, and leveraging on technology to do that. And last but not least, still very much in Singapore classrooms, in secondary schools and primary schools, a lot of the assessment and feedback, formative feedback to young people, is still test scores, quiz scores, and they've become quizlets. Okay, so but you still get quizzes, and you get test scores. And how do we then think about expanding and the access to more meaningful, more timely, more dynamic feedback that is based on in-situ interactions and learning processes? That's a big ask, but this is a nascent effort in that. So those were 3 contextual challenges that WeRead was designed to address, or attempt to address. So in Read, WeRead is a web-based collaborative critical reading interface and a learning with a learning analytics environment, or in the form of dashboards, so the learners and the teachers. Okay, and the aim, as I said again, was really to deepen collaborative critical reading skills as a generative social practice through richer dialogue with peers and the teacher around multimodal texts, implemented as part of the secondary 3 English language curriculum. Broadly speaking, it has in the design, in the techno-pedagogical design of WeRead, we try and remind ourselves it's guided by 2-fold learning affordances. One, therefore, the computer-supported collaborative dialogic learning environment to support, scaffold, and engage children in multimodal social dialogic learning, and complementing that, a dynamic, what we hope to be dynamic, visual learning analytics. Of course, it's a full journey, and I'll share with you our journey. And the aims of that really is to deepen reading engagement, as stated there, and enhance critical reading skills. Right? Now, very quickly, the WeRead is, as pedagogues, the learning theory and the pedagogical design principles are very important to us. And I very much believe that learning analytics, whatever form of formative feedback we capture and provide to our students, and more so, I've come to realize that it's very important that it's domain specific, that it was as Dragon shared earlier, what's the theory behind the learning, and how do you design the learning? And it's more than a matter of, is it quantitative data, is it predictive data, is it counts versus networks versus rich data? At the end, those matter. But what matters more is that counts could matter a lot if it's domain specific, you know, if it's relevant and makes sense in terms of in its pre-specified design. If it was very closely designed, aligned to a domain-specific learning outcome or pedagogical practice. I'm not sure if I'm making sense, but that's, you know, more and more I think it has to be domain-specific and very much tied to not only domain specific, but domain specificity. The learning outcomes and the learning tasks are very, very important. So reread is underpinned by socio-constructivistic learning theories, a number of those, but specifically multi-literacies pedagogical framework by the New London group that was first released in 1996, that talks about the importance of having 4 pedagogical components held together. Very importantly, situated practice, critical framing. So how do you design your learning tasks and environment to ensure that there was situated practice, there was critical framing in the learning tasks, at the same time, overt instruction, so explicit scaffolding, and the role of the teacher, the role of the scaffolding is particularly important, human or agent. And last, the transform practice, so generative, the learning engagement is generative in essence. So that is complemented with dialogic teaching and learning principles that have been designed by or perpetuated by Robin Alexander, a pedagogue in our field, a very well-known pedagogue in our field, and assessment for learning principles. So these are my slides. I won't go through them, but they're the micro principles underpinning those principles, the frameworks that I highlighted. And to unpack a little bit more the social dialogic learning component and the dynamic dashboard, and then I'll share with you what we've learned through trial 2 and trial 3, and the journey ahead for us, particularly what are some limitations and some possible collaborative pathways ahead. So multimodal text, every week the students engage in deep discussion, okay, collaborative discussion, 1 period a week, if that makes sense to you. So in English language in secondary school, they have 3 hours a week, thereabouts, 3 periods a week. 1 period is about 40 minutes. And so the teachers dedicated 1 out of 3 periods a week to reread, and we select a range of multimodal texts on ethical dilemmas, moral dilemmas that resonate with young people's lives and issues that they have to deal with, and put that out for young people to read and critically discuss. As they critically discuss, it's not we scaffold that with 7 critical lenses and 5 collaborative talk types. So young people have to, the students, as they look at the text, the 7 critical lenses are based on Paul and Elder's view of critical reasoning. So they have to think about what's the message, what's the intent, what's the purpose, all right, what are assumptions, how do we infer from this, what are viewpoints. And these are important critical lenses that we want young people to engage in and use as mental cognitive scaffolds as they engage in text critique. Apart from that, because we're talking about social dialogic practice, we also are given the scaffolds of collaborative talk types. So ideation, I think that, reflection, validation, very important, probing. All right, so as young people, as the learners engage in the text critique in that period, and they can do this at home as well, but we dedicate 1 formal schooling period to this activity a week. Before they put their comments up, they have to self-text. So they have to think, okay, am I talking about intent? And am I validating someone and replying someone, one of my peers? Or am I critiquing or challenging a particular viewpoint? Yeah, all right? So that's the pedagogical design that underpins the learning in reread. The second affordance is along this, as students engage online, then we capture a number of engagement data, participation data. We visualize this back to our students in terms of counts, for example, across text. How many replies, comments, word counts, how many likes have you received? And also we have teachers, we used to have peers, but in trial 3, we changed it to only teachers validation, teacher motivational badges. So was it a good effort to encourage, or was it exemplary? To highlight that that's something that they can look at. We also let them give them account, if you will, their usage of the critical lenses and the comment types. In the second trial, we had a generic dashboard where it was their data compared to the class average, which was heavily critiqued, as you can imagine, because there is no mean average student. The average student is not the real student in every class. I mean, it's debatable, and but that was in trial on design in trial 2. We improved that design, or what we think is an improvement. It's under critique in the third trial, and I'll share that with you later. Okay, but we give students an indication of, this is an indication of their choice or intent to use. Obviously, because it's a count on self-tag, great variations in accuracy, but at the very least, it indicates to the student what intent or what choice are they using, and in terms of their engagement with critical lenses and comment types. So we give them that indication. All right, and we have seen over time, and I'll share with you later, that students realize that, hey, in fact, they're not very sure what message actually means, and they're not very sure about impact. And as they look at, as they go back, there are resources online. If they hover over impact and hover over message, we have an unpacking of sentence starters and also descriptions about what those mean to sort of scaffold that further. People want to do it. And we've seen these shifts over time. Our students, we're trying to encourage a breadth of engagement in critical lenses and in collaborative talk types for our young people. We also have a social network map to show them who they're interacting with. The teachers can see the same thing, okay, who are disengaged and who's engaged in the discussion network. And we also link to their achievement tests. They see their test scores and their Quizlets and so on. Now, we also have self-report data, self-report questionnaire on how they see themselves on a range of 21st century skills, as well as their learning mindsets. And so that's visualized back to them too. Now, in trial 2, since trial 2, we have found observable teaching and learning gains of this nature. For it, reread compared to non-reread students, the comparison group, learning engagement, we've noticed a significant improvement in learning engagement in the reread groups as compared to the traditional pedagogy, which is just verbal discussions in class and unscaffolded reading. Teacher-student relatedness also significantly improved as compared to the comparison group, as well as critical reading fluency, which is assessed by tests, all right, by the teachers. And teachers, in terms of pedagogy, we've seen teachers using the network map because they didn't realize that this was the nature of the interactions with their students around the text. So it was just a teacher discussing as the stage on the stage with multiple students, and students were just commenting. And how do you move that into a more a richer social interactional pattern? Obviously, later as I will highlight the limitations, this does not take into account quality of the discussions, but it does give a sense of the richness of the interactions around the text, which is something that we were aspiring to. Students have, also articulated in their accounts what they felt to be the learning gains, particularly in terms of deepening collaborative critical reading, all right, as well as their appreciation for having data for the first time to think about, all right, and I'm not covering here how we scaffold students' interpretation and sense-making and application and correcting misconceptions and helping them to interpret the data in the right way rather than as an absolute truth of their dispositions and their skills. So that was ongoing as well, and that goes on 5 to 10 minutes in the start of the class. Okay, we take students through. But students talked about how it was eye-opening, and one that was very encouraging was that it was recurrent, where students talk about how it helped them to realize above and beyond skills and test scores that attitudes matter, and it made them realize that, oh, I actually apply a very surface learning attitude, to English language, and how this can maybe prompt me to think about changing my attitude towards learning for understanding rather than context scores. Teachers, interestingly, told us that they observed the well, the quality of talk improving over time, and how students were motivated and asked them, oh, if I talk more and I reply more of these texts, will I be more central in the network? Things that need to be addressed. But one thing that was very important was early this year. This is what our teachers are concerned about, right? For our colleagues interested in going to school. Yes, all the time they spent on reread did not affect their performance. Okay, so it was good that their scores were not worse in O levels. So they thought that was a great. In fact, they did better. But all the teachers were worried about in Singapore was we were innovating, we were doing this. What if their test scores got lower? And they felt sort of validated that their test scores did not reduce. In fact, it was higher. So we're very thankful for that and grateful. I think if the test scores reduce, I'm not sure that we will get continued funding for this. Okay, in the next one. But in part of our learning journey, we realized, this is not rocket science, and we know that it's been written in the literature very much so, but learning visualizations is a double-edged sword, that it was very, that there were nuances as to what types of students responded to what forms of data, and individual differences possibly matter. But one thing that one thing that made us want to sort of discover more about, we were talking about personalization, but the design of formative feedback was very important to us. We wanted to then compare in trial 3, which I will share with you. If we designed a dashboard at a peer reference, norm reference versus criterion reference, or based on a personal best dashboard compared to previous weeks, or as compared to a peer best, and what types of different effects that had on learning outcomes that we were trying to develop. Second, which I want to talk about today, that has some connections with what Karen was sharing with us, was that we realized that connective literacy, helping students understand that learning is primarily a social activity that requires them, to adapt and respond in nuanced ways and in fluid ways, depending on who they were interacting with, and seeing social positioning as learning capital that mattered to them, above and beyond content, was very imperative, was very nascent, and yet to emerge among many students. But this was very important, I think, because it shows that a lot of our teaching and learning in schools, the learning experiences are structured and the rewards are structured very individually. Even though we did a group learning and collaborative learning, and we talked about all this, the indicators, markers, data around processes and validation about their progress are still very much individual. So how do we nurture that connective literacy among young people? That was a real question among us that we're looking into more deeply. So just to give you a sense of very quickly the self-reference versus the personal best versus the peer best, it's quite similar, except one is primarily comparing the previous week data to the current week data on the range of dashboards and data that I shared with you, and the other is comparing to the top peer. Okay, so I'm going to skip through this, I'll save my slides. Now, have a guess, quick guess, and then I'll have my conclusion slide. What do you think is the impact of self versus peer dashboard on some learning outcomes? Critical reading fluency. Increase for one condition or both? Actually, we wanted to also test 4 conditions. We wanted to also look in prompts of active dashboards versus non and 4 conditions. And this was we had a no dashboard condition as well within class. So, but these are very preliminary, but I just want to share this. Self-reference, personal best dashboard, and peer best. Do you think it increased students in those conditions for critical reading fluency? Yes or no? Which one increased? Both increase? Both decrease? Make a guess. What do you think? Both increase. Both increase. Yeah. Okay, both increase. What about, so that's test-based, critical fluency. Critical reading ability, self-assess, both increase, one increase. What do you think? Sorry? Both? Both or one? Both, yeah. Okay, both increase now. All right, so in terms of learning achievements, in terms of learning outcomes, content, disciplinary mastery, we see those skills, okay? Both increasing for self and personal reference dashboards. What about cognitive engagement? Increase for one, for both, which? For one? For who? Which condition?
Self-reference.
Self-reference? Agree?
Here.
Oh, yeah? Okay. I'm doing this because when I presented this to the Permanent Secretary and the Master Plan for EXCO, comprising of senior leadership, they took bets and they said, let us know when your results are out. We bet that the peer dashboard for our Singaporean students would give us the best outcomes. And yeah, this is a preliminary analysis, so we don't really know. But so cognitive engagement increased for personal-based dashboards, but not peer-based dashboards. Academic self-concept, oh, I should not release that, but only increased for, well, repeated measures did not show any significant differences. So take this with a real pinch of salt, okay? So this is test. But academic self-concept increased for us personal best, but not peer best. What about curiosity? What do you think? Self-reference or peer reference? Joseph, growth mindset.
Sure. Peer-based.
Yeah, peer-based. We don't know why, so we'll have coffee and beer. Okay, but actually, it's like team test fishing. But we thought, we saw that kids were very, very interested, in looking at one another's dashboards and comparing that. But again, coming back to the point, I think rather than a novelty effect, what we want to inculcate, the purpose of this is to teach students how to be critical also of data about their learning processes, and not to treat data as a single source of truth, but data to be negotiated and made sense of, and for planning, for goal setting, and for adapting their own learning and taking charge of their own learning going forward. So very quickly in terms of challenges, we just want to qualify that in this work, we're very aware that we do not yet have the analytics required to assess quality of talk, and that is core to our project. And we're very much talking to Carolyn, Dragon, and other colleagues in the field who can come alongside us and help us. And I think Min and Joseph going forward, we would very much like to connect with you on these possibilities. Design enhancements are continuing to be important. And of course, we want to continue to generate and theorize, based on empirical insights on the following. What is the validity, as Dragon mentioned, of our data? More importantly, what's the impact on our teachers and our learners, beliefs, intentions, actions, effect, and outcomes, not only in that moment, but over a period of time, and how really dig into and scaffold the process of how teachers and learners sense make and use LA as formative feedback, but situated within an ecological lens. And I'll just close with this. To share with you, we just put together a special issue on learning analytics in diverse contexts, and that's free access, the editorial. But more importantly, just want to qualify that we need to understand and study learning analytics and within a using a ecological lens to understand pedagogy, because it's not just in the classrooms, but it's really beyond the classrooms, to the school and to society and to family cultures as well. So with that, I thank you very much, and I take questions. Thank you.